Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's live. I'm Chef AJ, and today I'm going to be talking all the way from Maui, Sarah Taylor. She's authored several books, and I'm going to introduce her to you right now. Welcome, Sarah.
Hey, thank you. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. I can see how beautiful it is behind you.
Yeah, it is. And as you know, we don't live here full time. We're in the Seattle area part time, and I've known you for what, like 17, 18 years. So it's really nice to be here during this specific time of year with everything that's going on. Being stuck at home most of the time. So we feel really lucky.
I can't imagine any place more beautiful to be at any time than Hawaii.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that is absolutely amazing. Is it different there? I mean, it is part of the United States. It's not connected, but does it feel, does it feel different there than it does here with the sheltering in place?
They've been really strict here in Maui with the coronavirus, issues going on. So I think we've got the least, even, per numbers. Hi, puppy. Um, I think we've got the least even per like 100,000 people. So we're doing really well, but they've been really strict about it. And they just decided we can't go walking on the beach. So there have been like letters to the governor going out about that now.
Oh, no, well, at least you have a very, very beautiful view.
Yeah.
I would live in Hawaii except for that darn quarantine period.
Yeah. But if you're going to be stuck somewhere.
That's
I'd
right.
rather be stuck here.
It's my favorite place on earth. So I know you only have one copy of one book with you, but talk about your books that you've written.
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah. So I've written a couple of vegan books. One of them is called Vegan in 30 Days. It was done years and years ago. Just really helping people do simple things that can be hard, like learning where to eat and what to buy and how to have Thanksgiving at your house, all kinds of things, and what you can and can't eat. And then the second book, after I gave a lot of lectures of that book, I had these people in the audience often asking the same question. And the question was, well, I've been vegetarian for, so many years and I can't go vegan. And so I wrote Vegetarian to Vegan, all the reasons why vegetarians might want to consider going vegan. So that's where that comes from.
I think that's so important because when I meet people that are vegetarian, assuming they're doing it for ethical reasons, a lot of them don't really understand that the most ethical thing you could do is to give up dairy and eggs.
Yeah, I think ethically it definitely is, but healthfully too. I remember I used to work with Joel Furman, and I'm pretty sure it was Joel who said one time, if somebody was going to give up one thing for their health, I would have them give up dairy.
Absolutely. And yet that is the thing that seems to be the hardest for so many people.
And seems to be healthier. Like they think that's healthier than steak or chicken and things like that. And in most cases, some it might be, but in most cases it's not. So yeah.
At all. So I always look forward. You write a letter every year at Christmas. Like I wish I always think about doing that and then I forget it right away. But I get that letter from you every year telling you like everything that's been going on.
Ah, thanks. Yeah, it's been a big year.
Yeah, like that's why we're here. So we don't mean to drop a bombshell on you, but I think your story and your attitude towards what's happened is going to inspire people. So tell us about your year because this is a different year for you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it because this is really, not only have I had a lot of people asking me to come on podcasts and things, but now I've heard that there is going to be a documentary and some things like that. So I think the story, I wouldn't think it was that big of a deal, but apparently it is for a lot of people. So I'm really glad we're talking about it today. So I'll start by saying what's happened. And what has happened is, like I said, we've been vegan. Well, you've been vegan longer than I have, a lot longer, but I've been vegan 18 or 19 years now, 18 years something. And, I've been healthy. I've been, my brain works, I've done well. And then I switched out of medical research. And by the way, I am going to tell everybody before I get too started that sometimes I do miss words and sometimes I do forget what I was talking about. So if that happens, don't be surprised. And what were we just talking about?
Yeah, what the year, the profound year you've had, because we're going to drop a bombshell on.
Oh yeah, thank you. So yeah, I had been working in medical research for 20 years, and I'd worked with Joel Furman for a while too, but I mostly worked in ophthalmology research for the eyes. And then I decided that I was going to switch and get another master's degree and go into counseling. and I really loved it. And I ended up, in all of my research, doing some research on a type of counseling called existential counseling, and it's often on topics, things like death and people who are going through midlife crises, things like that. What's going on. And so interestingly, I ended up doing that, and sorry, I'm stuck with where I was again.
Yeah. You were doing the counseling and
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. So yeah, I was doing the counseling, and in that counseling, I just thought, wow, I really, really want to do this type of existential counseling. And interestingly, I met a woman at the hospital who was teaching the vegan diet. And she was a medical doctor. And she was like, oh, most of the doctors are just, wanting me out of here, the way I'm talking about the vegan diet. But she was a cancer doctor. And so we decided we were going to do cancer stuff together. We were even thinking about writing a book together on the cancer, the vegan diet for cancer patients. And then I said to her, I'm also just graduating with my master's degree for counseling. And she said, oh my God, if that's true, I really, really would love to have you at my office. I give you a free room and everything, because I have all these patients that have cancer that are really upset. And you can imagine that. And I said, yeah. So I went in to see these patients. And for a year, I was dealing with cancer patients. It was really interesting. So here's where my story comes in. Is one day I had this patient and she was leaving. I gave her a hug goodbye. She's walking down the hall, and next thing you know, long story short, I won't get into all the details, but I immediately start having a seizure and end up across the street at the emergency room. And I was having a seizure that they didn't know. At first they thought I had something else, but after 2 weeks, they ended up doing brain surgery, cutting into my brain and saying she's got brain cancer. And at the time they thought it was, even though they only officially called it a phase 2, because you can't really go digging to the back of the brain without causing problems. They just took a little sample from the front. In the back, you could see with the x-ray or whatever it was, MRI, that there was a pea-sized piece that was really bright white. And they said, that's almost 100% a phase 3, Sarah. And I said, okay. And so 3.5 weeks later, I did another MRI, and that was 4 times bigger than it was. And the doctor just said, Sarah, I've been doing this for 35 years, and it's rare that I see it go this fast. I really think you have stage 4. This is a glioblastoma. And I said, okay. And everybody would say, is it okay? Are you okay? I'm like, it's okay. And they'd say, how can this be okay? Whether I was talking to the doctor, I was talking to friends or family, as I told them this information, they'd say, how can this be okay? And I said, I have had an amazing life. I've been so blessed to be brought up by parents who were loving and kind. We weren't rich or anything, but we were in a neighborhood that was, it was fine. Like we didn't have to worry about losing our lives or anything like that in the neighborhood. We stayed out late at night playing with our friends and went to college and all that stuff. And that's what really, got me going. I had a brain that worked well. I was able to go to college, and that changed the world for me. And I think, wow, so many people my age are sitting in front of the TV every day. They are, really weighing a lot, maybe hundreds of pounds over what they should be. And they don't want to be that way. It's not like they're not thinking about it or anything else, but they're having a tough life. And when I think about my life, I think, wow, I've written books and I've started a new career, and I liked my old career. And, I've gone skiing and I've traveled and done a lot of great things. So I've decided that this diagnosis is not something that I'm going to be upset about. I'm going to be really, really grateful. Really grateful.
I mean, I'm upset about it. I don't know how I just think it's remarkable and extraordinary. And I never know what to say when somebody tells me they have, like when you told me I felt like, God, I shouldn't have even bothered her. I send you an email about something so insignificant, and then you write back, and it's like, I never know what to say. Like, what do you say to somebody that tells you, people think of cancer as the worst thing that can happen to them. I think a lot of people think that.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea to ask why. for yourself, if that's something for you. Because, and by the way, I have these little videos, I'll just say as a side, that I've got on YouTube now. But if you want to friend me on Facebook, my Facebook name is Sarah Kenefick Taylor, Kenefick, because that's the only way people would find me separately from all the millions of Sarah Taylors. But I have videos that the very first one started the day after Thanksgiving, where I talked about what's going on. And what I say is, two things. I mean, one is really living a life where you can look back at it and say, wow, you know what? I've traveled the world. I've been on safari, or whatever it is you like to do. I've had careers I've enjoyed, not just careers that, okay, well, I got some money coming, but now I got to go back on Monday. Stop doing that. Find out what you're going to like and what you're going to really enjoy getting up for most days. Maybe not every day, but most days. That's a really big part. But another big part too, and this is what's really affected me in such a big way, is I had this life where, when I was younger, I'm going to say up to about early 30s, I was so, I didn't think I was at all. I thought, oh, I'm smart and, everything else. I was really, what's what I'm looking for when someone just doesn't have a strong, you know what I'm trying to say, just not a lot going on for me. I was worried most about my appearance, my hairdo. If I gained 3 pounds, oh my God, 3 pounds, I didn't want to be more than 138, it was just kind of crazy. And when I went to, well, I think it's about the time I met you. So that was when I met John Robbins, and I had read his book, and that was what turned me vegan. And John Robbins said, it was not that he said anything. It's just that in his book, I really started to put the animals before my weight. And I picked his book up because I was in a huge hurry to lose some weight. And when I lost his weight, or when I lost weight because of his diet, it didn't matter anymore, because I wasn't really there just to lose weight. I was there because what he had said got me understanding how bad things are for the animals. And that really, really changed me. And I just thought, wow, I can't eat that non-vegan stuff ever again. And I went vegan overnight. And so that really changed me. And for 10 years, I've always been really left brain, which is the side of my, that's the side of my head that's, having a problem, is the left brain. But left brain really, you get your details down and you start doing things. And, it's very, like scientists tend to be very left brained, whereas people in theater, people in music, they tend to be very right brain. And anyway, as I did that, I'm trying to think where I was in my story. So I had read John Robbins information, which had a lot of left brain information in it, but it also got you thinking about, why am I eating this when it's causing so much harm to animals? And I've always loved animals, cats, dogs, whatever. And I just never really thought about it much. So anyway, for like 10 years, I was reading books and learning more about it, and really trying very, very hard to just get a little bit more knowledgeable and learn more about spirituality and things like that. And then we bought this house in Maui. And when we bought the house in Maui, that was about 10 years ago or so. That's when things really got different for me, because out here in Maui, there's a huge vegan group out here, and many, many people in the vegan group are part of a spiritual group as well. So you don't have to be, you could be whatever you want. And when I say spiritual, it's very vague. So you could be Christian, Jewish, whatever you want. You could be, all of them above, or, it doesn't really matter. But I love that. And it really had got me starting to be more careful with my reading. Like, I used to just read and shut the book, and read the next book, shut the book. But now I was actually practicing for the first time, getting into meditation, asking people who really were way ahead of me in their practice and things like that. And that's when life really started to change. I mean, boy, AJ, I'll tell you, it was like, I really started changing who I was as a person. And I'll say the biggest point that came out of this, that I'm really trying to tell everybody, and people are really kind of grabbing onto, is that over those years, what I learned is to really be present with what I am doing and where I am. And so it's nothing that happened overnight. It's not like I read a book and it was fixed or anything like that. But over time, I started doing things just like making my life a little quieter, stop watching the TV so much. I quit watching the news years and years before, which is super helpful, really helpful. But I just started spending a lot of quiet time. So if I was at the airport, which I did every week for work, I didn't sit there on my phone the whole time as I'm getting on the plane. Hey, okay, so I need to talk to you. I'm getting on the plane. I got 2 minutes. Blah, 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 blah. It wasn't like that. I just said, no, I will call them when I'm in the car when I land. And I would just sit there in quietness and I would look around and I'd say, oh, look at that little lady's grandchild, or, oh, look at that guy's book he's reading. He's loving it, and I would just notice these things and be present. And when we're present, this is when life starts changing. This is when life really starts changing.
Has anybody given you any opinion on what could have caused this in somebody so young and healthy?
That's a great question. No, there's only 2 or 3 people out of like 100,000 or something get this. It's really rare. And they don't know what's really causing it in most people because there's so few of us that have it. There is one interesting thing that I heard about diet is that not that diet causes it, but that if you get it, you can go on a keto diet, because the keto diet, the only thing it's known to help, in the short term, if people lose weight, they'll have better diabetes and things like that. But long term, the one thing it's been shown to work on is the brain. And so this was a really interesting conversation, because Joel Fuhrman said to me, Sarah, the only thing that we know can increase your life a bit, and there's very few studies already, so we don't have a lot of information. So right now it's not a long time, but it might be if you do well. But if you go on a really severe keto diet, like 85% fat, we can at least get you probably an extra 4 months. And by the way, the months you get are very, very low. I'm for my genetics and everything, it's under a year already is what they're guessing, 7.5 months. So we'll see what happens. But where was I going with that?
What about fasting? Because if you fast your ketosis, would that help?
Yeah. So if your brain has any kind of sugar in it, which either comes from sugar or from carbohydrates because they turn to sugar, that can cause a problem. So yeah, if you fast, but you can't fast your whole life. Yeah, but I did fast quite a bit when I was getting my chemo and radiation the first time, and it was not comfortable, but yeah, I did feel better. So
people are saying you're inspiring and they love your attitude. You're so sweet. And
thank you.
Man, I can't, nobody can really imagine what they do until it happens, but I think I would just be so angry.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are. And this is where I go back again to I dealt as a therapist with cancer patients. And so I saw them so sad and so unhappy. And when I started working with them, often it would only take 2 or 3 months of working together where things would completely change. And it was just asking different questions. And, when you have questions like, how could this be happening to me? Why, when I'm so young? Who screwed me over kind of thing. All of that doesn't matter. It's happening. And something like brain cancer is very, very unlikely to keep you alive after a year or two. It can happen for a very small number of people. I hope I'll be one of them. But, statistically, it's extremely low. And I think, we're all going to die. And so this is where I think I've kind of become kind of popular with podcasts and things lately, is that people start saying, well, how are you okay? And I say, well, I've thought about this because all these years, since I got to Maui and got involved with the spiritual group, I've been reading books and asking questions and wondering, like, what do I really believe about religion or spirituality? Because, I was English, my mom's English, and I was brought up in a Christian household. And so I was told, hey, this is Christianity and you're going to go to heaven. And so I just believed it for many, many, many years. And I'm not saying anybody shouldn't believe it. But what I am saying is that you need to learn to believe something that important on your own brain, not because someone told you to believe it. And so that was the big thing for me, was that I was just sitting there, watching people talk to me and how upset they were at the whole idea of sorry, I forgot what I was talking about again.
That's okay. You know, it's funny. I'm recovering from a concussion, and this happens to me all the time. I
Right.
walk into the pantry to get cinnamon, and I'm standing there, and I don't remember why I'm in the pantry. So
Yeah.
don't worry about it.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, I can't remember what it was.
In touch with the spiritual community. In some ways, you've prepared for this because you were questioning what your spiritual beliefs are. And
Yes. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad your brain's doing that well,
well,
right?
no, but I'm a good listener.
Yeah, yeah. So you said it was, say the word again.
The how that you, in some ways, you prepared for this without knowing it, like
Yeah.
just by being in the spiritual community, being a counselor of people that had cancer.
Yeah, and being prepared for it. So, that was just a really big deal, I think, because one of the things I've learned is that as I've gotten older, I've just realized like, hey, I've I've asked myself, what do I believe? Like, Sarah, what do you believe? And as I read all these different spiritual groups, everything from Christianity to Judaism to Buddhism, I mean, all over the world, I read these things and I went and talked to people and listened to lectures and all kinds of things. And then I found out what I really do believe. And I don't even need to tell anybody because what I believe isn't important to what anybody else believes. They need to figure out for themselves. But I will say, here's one thing I will say is that because I was a medical researcher, I can be pretty like hard to convince sometimes. And, so if someone says, oh, yes, we had 8 angels running around our house yesterday, I'd be like, oh, really? Are you sure? Just because that's how I think about things. But what I found was that there were a couple of books that I read that really, really, as a therapist and as a researcher, made me go, whoa. And they sound like they're written by the same person, and they're not. They're not even related. But one's called Life After Life, and one's called Life Before Life. And Life Before Life talks about people who say, oh, I used to be so-and-so in my last life. And what you'll find is when you look at the research by that, which, by the way, University of Virginia has been doing research for 30 or 40 years on that now. And they found that it's almost always children, like maybe up to 5 to 7 years old, that are talking about how much they can live. How old or who they were in their last life. And so what happens is that when that happens, and this is all over the world, they don't just take American kids, but they take them all over the world. And when a kid says, oh, I used to be so-and-so, oh, I used to be Chef AJ. Oh, really? Tell us about that. So they don't say, oh, you mean Chef AJ down in California, blah, blah, blah. They don't do any of that. They just say, oh, tell us about Chef AJ. And if the kid goes, well, I was Chef AJ and I cooked because I was a chef. And that's all they could say. They'd take the kid out of the research and say, yeah, it didn't have enough information. But there were stories in there that were unbelievable about how much information these kids would have. And someone that I know who I met in research, who was she was a doctor and she was extremely researching and very close to other ideas that could happen. Her daughter came to her at 1.5 years old, and I'm not going to give her name or anything, but when her daughter was very young, she was holding her daughter, and her daughter just gave a couple words here and there, like mama, doggy, or that kind of thing. She didn't really have long words. Anyway, her mother had been dead for 5 or 6 years. And by the way, when someone, well, maybe she's dead 7 years or something, but by the way, they say that the average, she can change, but the average change in if somebody dies and is reincarnated, they usually come within 5 to 7 years. So this is interesting. Her mom died, who is a psychiatrist, and then somebody came in as her daughter, and her daughter was 1.5 years old. In her arm, as she's getting ready for her daughter's crib, and her daughter says, hey, Mom, and grabs her cheeks and turns her and looks at her. And she starts going over, I can't remember the guy's name, anybody else would, but it's a famous poet who does poetry for adults. It's not children poetry at all. And it was one of these long, long poems. And this kid announced the poem from beginning to end without any problems at all. I mean, this kid couldn't even speak like that yet. It was only 1.5 years old. And that was a poem that her mother used to do every week. Even when she'd moved out, even when she was married, her mom would call her and do that poem. So it seemed to her, even as someone who's totally against anything that's not well researched, she was so emotional about it. And she said, I don't even like to talk about this because people would think I'm crazy, but this is what my daughter did. And there are a lot of stories like that. So when you start reading about them, to me, and this might not be true to other people listening, but to me, when I hear stories like that, I go, wow, when it's that many thousands of people with stories like that, I think that's really interesting. Is there reincarnation? And then you get to decide for yourself if you believe it or not. And that's when things get really, really interesting.
What book can we find this story in?
So that book was Life Before Life. There was a similar book called Life After Life. And so that was people who die for a short time, like a minute or two in the hospital, and then they come back to life. And there's actually a really big research study that just got done, that was done in cardiovascular patients recently. They did over 2,000 patients. And when they were, having a heart attack and then they actually died, but were brought back to life, they asked them, anything happened? And about 90% said, I don't remember anything, but 10% all kind of had the same story with generally a lot of the same details. And it was like, oh my gosh, you have no idea. It was amazing. It was so white. It was totally bright and white. And, I could see people that were dead in my family, or, they all had details. And many of the details were very much the same between different people. But I thought that was really interesting because when you're looking at over 2,000 people, you now have over 200 people who are telling very, very similar stories. And they're very happy stories. And that I think was great,
You didn't even for a moment. I mean, what was it like when you first got the diagnosis? Do you remember? Were you shocked? Were you sad? I have so much empathy because I cannot imagine what you had gone through.
Yeah, none of that. And the reason I say none of that is not because I was diagnosed and then I went into all of this reading and research. I'd done that years. For the past 10 years, like I said, I've been reading and researching and going to lectures and things like that, meditating. And so when the doctor looked at me and the doctor came in and his face was just down and he said, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry. And I couldn't be more upset about your genetics. And, because when you look at all the details, I mean, everybody does pretty poorly, but with my genetics, it's the worst. And, when he said all that, I was like, it's okay. It's fine. And, at first, the first month, I think maybe 2 months, I have people in my life saying, oh, you're going to come at it. You're just, that's what I'm looking for, like not worrying about it right now. You're pretending like it's not a problem right now, but it'll get you. Don't worry. It's never gotten me. I'm not afraid to die. Totally not afraid to die. And I'm more than anything, I'm just, for the past many years, I've been so grateful at everything that's been going on. And it's not like some bad things haven't happened, but in general, I've had a really good life. And I'm just sitting here just so grateful all the time that it's hard. If a doctor says, hey, you're going to die, for me, I think, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I had this life. I would so much rather have this 48-year life that I've had than many, many people's 80-year lives that I've seen going on.
Wow. But before this, you had pretty good health in all areas, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of came out of nowhere.
How did your friends and family respond?
They have had a hard time, but not more than the average family would. But yeah, in general, I think that's difficult. I think for me, and I told my husband this, I said, I think I would have a much harder time if you had this diagnosis than me, because I would hate to be left without you for a while, even though my beliefs are that we'd probably find each other sometime in the future. I don't know. But it would be hard, to finish my life without him. I'd be sad about that, but you never know, like maybe you're sad for 6 months or 12 months, and then you meet this amazing person who reminds you of your husband, and, you have a great time with that person. And I don't know, we just don't know. And I think that's what we humans tend to do is we tend to think we know what's going to happen and we tend to assume it's going to be bad and negative. And so
I-
often it doesn't have to be.
Monica says, is Sarah 48?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hope you're writing a book right now because I think you could help so many people just with your attitude, because it's not one that I've seen before.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if I can write a book. I've written 3 in the past and I don't know if I can get one to come out now, but I do have a documentary coming out and we'll see.
Or maybe just a video blog, because I'm telling everybody, I'm giving the link to your Facebook page right here in the notes, and I'm telling people to please go check you out, and if they want to see the video, because I know you've been posting videos on your page.
Yeah, and I've also been posting those videos on YouTube. So if you're not on Facebook or you don't want to be friends on Facebook, I put them all on YouTube, and I'd have to look up what that link is and then send it to you, and we can put it on the.
Sure, we could definitely put it in the show notes. How's your husband doing? How long have you guys been married? You don't have children, correct?
No, we don't have kids. We met through work, and he is doing okay. He just the day I was diagnosed, he said, "I'm taking a year off," and I was like, "Wow, okay." And I so appreciate that. That's why we're here on Maui so much now, and that just makes life great. But he's had times that he'll cry, and I think he's like most men who are taught you're not supposed to be emotional, you're not supposed to be sad, so like most men, he tries not to be, and I keep telling him, like, let it out, it's okay, and that's one of the things I've learned that I think is so helpful. If any of you have this experience, I hope you try it soon, because this is so helpful. If you're upset about something, just let yourself cry, but don't have any thoughts about it. Just be like, I'm sad, I'm sad. If you have to tell yourself something, I'm sad, this is sad, this is scary, I'm upset. But don't say anything like, I'm too young, or he's being a jerk, or she should have done this. These are beliefs that we have. But if we just sit with the emotion, we're usually done with it in 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds. It's unbelievable. And then you can feel quite fine and move on with life.
That's good advice for even people without serious diagnosis, even the
Yeah.
people who deal with that are, quote, food addicts. If they would just sit with the feeling, it would be done, and they wouldn't have to then eat over it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so true. That's so true. Yeah. I found that. That's great advice.
Are your parents still alive, and do you have siblings, and how are they handling it?
Yeah, my parents are alive, and I have one sister. My sister's doing what she normally does when anyone is in need, which is she jumps in to help. So she's been doing that. I think that's one of her ways to deal. Mom, I think, is having a bit of a rough time, but being English, she's told us, like, hey, I'd like to have my rough time alone. And my dad was having a bit of a rough time. And one day we went out to lunch together. And I taught him basically what I've already said here, which is, Dad, like, we're so lucky to have had this life we've had. And I just went down this list of all these things that have been good. And even, as a therapist, I know many, many people have had bad parts of their life. But overall, especially if you've learned from the bad parts, you'll think they're good. And my dad, he got that. And he said, Sarah, I agree. And I'll tell you what I told him, which is what I've told people. And I think one of my very early videos that I put out, they're like 5 or 10 minutes, they're not long, is that we've all been given these lives. And some of us have been raped. Some of us have, been in really bad situations, lost a leg, whatever. They can be really, really hard. But interestingly, when I told people about my beliefs about what's going on in life, and what I would call the wish I could remember the name I use, because it's such a common thing I've always talked about, but I lose words all the time now. But long story short, it's like a gold ticket incarnation, which is something that I've had, but a lot of people haven't had. Like, I haven't been raped, and I haven't had anything major go on. But then what I tell people is, I said, if you have, like, let's say that you went through something really bad or several things really bad, the question I have for you, and either answer is fair, but the question I have for you is, what's that thing at the, like, if you go down to Las Vegas where the roulette wheel,
Mm-hmm.
They have a roulette wheel with a roulette ball. And they're saying, okay, well, if you don't like this life you're in, you're 48 years old, would you like to go on the roulette wheel? And we can guarantee you there's 3 million people every year who live to be 80-ish, which is the, 80, 83, whatever the normal amount is that people make. We'll put you in that $3 million group, and you'll come in at 48 years old. You won't know your past life, but we'll just put you on that, and we'll roll you in this roulette wheel, and wherever you land, anywhere in the world, that's where you're going to go. So you could end up in China, you could end up in Canada, you could end up with money, no money, with, there could be a lot of things that change. And the question is, would you do that if you knew that you could go from having this diagnosis at 48 to living until you're 80? And I have not met one person yet, not one person yet who said they would do that. I've had people say to me, look, I've been through a lot of crappy things, but the reason I wouldn't change that is because I feel like I have learned. I've had people tell me like, yeah, I was raped by my dad, but I learned from that and I've grown from that. And now that I'm older, it's not like I'd want to go through it again, but I wouldn't cut my life off to get away from it. It's pretty amazing.
Vicki says, I'm learning that gratitude is the path to being happy, and Sarah is illuminating that for us right here. And are you done with the surgeries and the chemos or radiations or other the conventional treatments that they have to offer you?
I don't know. There are many options, and as you know, when we've got a history with health, like we do as vegans, there's a lot of things we're like, I don't know that even though the doctor's saying I should do that I should. So I do have a great doctor that way, but there's some questions about should I continue chemotherapy, and I'm pretty much against it, and I think my doctor's going to be against it too. So we'll see if I keep doing it or not.
I almost wish there was a handbook for us lay people, like on how to treat people with cancer or a terminal disease, which I don't believe is terminal until you actually die. I mean, I am putting my money that you're going to be a miracle. And everybody here is praying for that too. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, it's hard. It's going through a lot, Chef AJ.
It's just so unfair when somebody kind and beautiful and young and vegan. I mean, it's not that I want anyone to have cancer, but it just doesn't seem fair.
But it could be an amazing thing because, as we had both gone into this area of work, and I'd written some books, but I was working on the side. I was working in research, and then I was working as a counselor, so I wasn't getting as much display as you do because you're doing it full time. And now all of a sudden I'm getting a lot of display like this, and people are writing what this person just said to you. I'm hearing that a lot, and I'm so glad that it's helpful, And so if I die over this, which maybe I won't, I mean, that'd be awesome, wouldn't it? I'd be so happy. But if I do, it's okay, because I've had so many people write me letters saying, wow, Sarah, you have no idea. I don't know how to put it in words, but you've changed my life, and I wish I could describe it. And I think, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I've written vegan books, and I've gotten a few letters like that and things, but all of a sudden I'm helping people. I couldn't be more grateful and feel gratitude to be in this position. So if I'm gone in a few months or a few years, I've probably done more help in those months or years than I might have been able to do otherwise. So it's okay,
You've got an amazing attitude. I never know what to like even when I got your email, my heart, I never know how much, or even when people say somebody died, I never know how intrusive to be with somebody, that's not like a family member. And is it better to tell, can you help us? Or is just everybody different? They go through their own disease process differently.
Mm-hmm. That's what I think is true. I think everybody's different. And some people, I'm surprised because I'm different. Some people won't tell people when they have cancer. I have a good friend who went through a full cancer and chemo and everything and didn't tell anybody. And she's been through it now. And so she told me recently, but that was really surprising, so everybody's different. And
have you ever, I think there different people do different things, and I know you have probably a lot of different doctors giving you different advice, including plant-based doctors. But I mean, some people do things like they go to other countries, like for healing. Like I've heard of John of God, people going
Mhm.
there. I've heard of people going. People are saying, these different centers in Mexico or other. Have you ever entertained any of those things?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, John of God is one of the people I'd thought of. But I'm kind of interesting in the sense, I think that, having worked in medical research for 20 years, I've got one foot that's in the research. I'm on medline.com. I'm reading, the good research from all these years. And the other foot loves to sit in, the spiritual world. And so that could be John of God. That could be just going to, a local place. I mean, there could be so many things you can do in that field. So, you have to figure out what feels good to you. And I think that's one of the interesting things that not only my left brain where the cancer is, but they did a study on me. It's called a WADA study, which they don't really do very often anymore. But anyway, I'm far off the trail on the left side of the brain. That's what the WADA study does. It says, are you right brain, mostly right brain or left brain? And if you are you like strongly one or the other? And I was like off the charts. They were shocked at how left brain I was. And so the interesting thing about that is that, what was my point going to be
About entertaining, going to some of these other places that people have gone to.
Oh, yeah, that probably is where I was going, was that kind of keeps you really in the vein of medicine. But interestingly, because my brain was getting so what's it called when it gets bigger and bigger, when something's
It's not hypertrophy, is it? Or?
not hypertrophy, but when anything, like if you hit your arm and it gets a little bigger. This is me losing a word. So
We could have a game show.
yeah, I'm sure people are probably typing the answers.
They answer when you hit something and it gets bigger.
When it just swollen.
Okay. It's like we're playing passwords. Debbie Capone has the answer correct.
Yeah, this is my life now, is that people just have to be a little patient with me coming up with
Hey,
words.
that's
I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so, and what was the word I came up with?
Swollen.
Swollen. Oh yeah. So when my left brain was swollen, my right brain just started working a little bit more, which was really interesting. And so like I've been painting and drawing and doing some really interesting things. And I don't remember why I brought that up, but it's kind of neat to see.
That's good, because Monica actually said, are you doing any fun activities in lockdown on Maui? So painting sounds like a fun activity.
Yeah. I've been painting and drawing a lot, which has been kind of fun. And you can still go walking and things. You're just not allowed to go on the beach anymore, which is driving me nuts. So walked along Hana Highway this morning.
Are you familiar with Dr. Kelly Turner's work about, I think it's called Radical Recovery or Radical Remission?
Yes, I read her book. Yeah. In fact, she's the one, I read 2 books, one right after the other. That's the book that has 9 things you should do. Is that right?
Something like that. It's been a while since I read it.
Yeah, my husband read it first and then passed it to me and said, well, you pretty much do everything, but read the one on diet. And so I've seen that before, that people with brain cancer do tend to do better with a keto diet. And I talked to Joel Furman about that, by the way, and he said, I really recommend you do that. And I said, well, look, Joel, I wanted to go vegan to lose weight, but the book that I read, not realizing what I'd bought, was John Robbins' book, Diet for New America. And when I heard about the animals, I said, I'm never, ever, ever going to eat those again. And so I've not had the issue of going vegan. That's never been an issue. The issue of being a healthy vegan, it can be an issue sometimes. And you know about that. I mean, you're training all these people to really eat a healthy vegan diet. But why did I bring up?
Yeah, well, I would did they expect or want you to go vegan keto or keto?
Oh, yeah. So Joel had said, either one's fine, but I just don't think you're going to be able to stay vegan keto because there's so little to eat. I mean, the vegan diet is here and the keto diet's here. They're so far apart. And so he was right. There was so little to eat. It was basically like, because it has to be 85% fat, way fatter than just a regular keto diet for it to help your brain. So there was so little to eat. It was like salad with loads of fatty salad dressing or curry with loads of curry fatty dressing. It's pretty much it.
It doesn't sound very delicious to me. And
Mm.
if I was living my last few lives, it's interesting. Before you said, if I was living my last few lives, if I was living my last few days on earth, that doesn't sound like something I'd want to eat, even if I wasn't. It just sounds.
Yeah. So I literally sat down with my husband one day because, I went through this vegan keto diet for probably 7 or 8 weeks when I did my first thing with keto or with chemo, which was like 6 weeks. And when I was done, it was really interesting because we went to the doctor and he had said that in 3.5 weeks, my piece of cancer that was really solid had quadrupled in 3.5 weeks. And so that's when he was really scared. I think I already mentioned that. And then he put me on this chemo and everything. And when I came out, everything had gone flat. It hadn't gotten worse. It hadn't gotten better. And the doctor was like, I am so excited. Like, I never see it like this. It's when things start moving as fast as yours were, they might slow down, but they'll still get bigger and get worse. And he said, the fact that yours has not changed is unbelievable. And he was so excited about it. And so, the question was, well, there's a good chance it's the diet, I mean, I think Joel Furman was right, but I couldn't eat that way. And I'm not willing to go to a meat-based one.
Right.
And so my husband and I had a long talk about it. And he said, would you consider, I'm really like, let's talk about it and not just, rah, 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 rah. Like, let's really talk about it. Could you do that? And I said, honestly, Mark, I said, if you could tell me that I would kill one animal or two animals in my life to live the rest of my life, maybe I would be willing to do that. A lion kills some other animal out in the safari, So yeah, animals kill each other, but the way our animals are killed in our, animal farms where things are being raised, I said, I can't at all be a part of that at all. And I just didn't want anything to do with it. So I said, unless I were to start going to some local place where I could see that the animals, you can see this on Maui sometimes, everyone's running around, they're all happy. And then one day, whoop, they're killed. I said, if I knew that was happening, I might be more up for it, but probably not, just for my own spiritual reasons. But that's not likely, because I like to go out to eat and I like to be with my friends and they might cook or something. And I said, the chances are it's not going to happen. So I'm not willing to eat animals. And we had a long talk about it. And he said, so this is your life. And I said, this is my life. It's okay. Like, we're all going to die. We're all going to die.
Wow. Roxanne says, despite it all, she values how she's helping others. What a treasure. Debbie says, thank you. I needed a good dose of a beautiful outlook today. I don't, Kim says, thank you so much for sharing your story. I don't, Jody says, immense gratitude for your sharing your precious time with us today, Sarah, and she's sending you hearts. People are asking if they could see your paintings.
Oh, my paintings. Well, let's see. I don't know if I have any. I had one left over. I just gave it to my friend the other day, so that's gone. I'm trying to think if I have. I do. I have a drawing if you want to see that.
Yeah, sure. I'll entertain the people while
Okay.
you're getting it. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for being here. Isn't she incredible? I'm hoping I can get through this interview. It's just, I was so touched by her story. And when I heard about this, and I'm so thankful that she is willing to talk about it. So if you know anybody that's struggling with cancer, maybe send them this interview.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you, first of all, being a left brain person, I have never ever been in art or anything like that. So it's not like I've turned into some sort of amazing artist. But I will tell you, I hope you can see it okay. I was given a coloring book for adults, and look at that. I don't know, that to me, that's a lot better than I could have done.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's like, and when you see like an orange, for example, that's going dark orange to light orange, that's the same pen or the same pencil. I've just learned to drag it in a little bit more. So same thing with these, in the next one I just started, there's several different types of green in there. Actually, only 3 different types of green, but it looks to me like there's 6 or 7 different types of green. So it's kind of cool to watch that happen. So it's just fun. I'm not, like I said, I'm not turning into any kind of amazing artist, but considering what I could do, 3 years ago, that's pretty amazing.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
We could have started with this, but we didn't. Monica said, can you tell us about your life? Where were you born, went to school, work, etc.?
Sure. Yeah. My dad was in the Air Force. So I was born in Illinois, moved to Germany. And then by the time I was 7, they moved to Gig Harbor, Washington, which is close to Tacoma. And they still live in the same house. And I went to several different universities for different things. So I went to University of Washington for an undergrad. I went to Seattle University for what did I get there? MBA, Masters in Business Association. And I ended up kind of one of those things where you're part online and part in person, more online though, at Boston, is it University of Massachusetts, Boston, for my master's in counseling. So that's what I've been doing. And for my main jobs, I worked mostly either at Merck or Genentech doing ophthalmology research. And then on the side, I did some vegan books I already mentioned, and wrote a book on the pharmaceutical industry when I was really young. And other than that, just loved to play tennis and travel and, had some things like that. Thank you for asking.
Have you ever played pickleball? Because you said you might come to the Palm Springs area.
Oh, I would love to try it. No, I've not really. I mean, I've played it a few times, but not many. But I used to play tennis, but I ended up getting back surgery because my back went out so badly from it.
How did you get involved working with Dr. Furman?
Oh, that's a great question. So this is kind of a funny story. I went to one of his annual things that he does. It was maybe his very first one. If it wasn't, it was the second one. It was in Utah. And they started with a dinner where you just go get your dinner and sit down, and then you go up and the program starts. And so I was sitting, I think by myself or maybe with one other person at a table, and Joel and his wife and 2 or 3 other people from his family come over to this table that was mostly empty, this big round table, and says, do you mind if we join you? I'm like, no, that's great, So I'm sitting next to him, and at some point he says, well, I need to stand up and, tell everyone to go upstairs. And I said, wait a minute, you're going to stand up and tell them to go upstairs? Like, shouldn't you have somebody do that for you since you're the person in charge of speaking? And he goes, well, no, I don't really have anybody to do that. And I'll just do it. And I said, well, who's going to introduce you? He says, I don't have anybody introducing me. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And he says, well, you don't have to do that. I said, yeah, I'm going to do this. And so I did. I stood up and I said, if everybody can head upstairs in the next 5 minutes, that would be great. And when I got up there, I hadn't had time to look up all of his history and all that kind of stuff. So I got up there and I said, it's just so funny. I said, how many of you have had your life changed by knowing Joel Fuhrman or reading his information? And all of a sudden, hands started going up, and everybody, and people started yelling over each other, I lost 60 pounds. Well, I had no cancer after that, or I got rid of my cardiac disease after that. And everyone's yelling out their stuff. And Joel's literally sitting there in the front going, I was just so shocked that, this was happening. And that was the introduction. And from that day forward, he ended up hiring me, and I ended up working with him and flew out to the East Coast every month. And so it's been kind of interesting, but that went on for not too long because I ended up going back into research again. So
that is a great story. We focus so much on, like you were talking, left brain and right brain. And I find that there's kind of a disconnect almost in the plant-based world between science and spirituality. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I'm not criticizing it because people are entitled to believe what they believe. And I'm not saying it's even a bad thing, but it's refreshing when you have somebody that can, do both. And some of the doctors that I interview, they tend to mostly be more Adventist doctors. They have, those pieces together. They can look at the science, but they can also, kind of look at the heart. And I've been doing more of these on my channel. I had a Reiki person, and some people are going to bash me because it's unscientific or whatever. I don't care because I'm 60 now. Once you're 60, you don't really care anymore, So, but a Reiki person and an animal communicator and another spiritual lady. And I was just wondering if you've ever done or considered some of those alternate healing modalities like Reiki now or things like that.
Yeah, I did try Reiki earlier in my life, and I didn't find much of I didn't find a whole lot for whatever I was going through at the time. I don't even remember now. But But I have found for me specifically, and I think a lot of these things can work differently for different people. Um, but for me, really going into a quiet mental place and just getting really quiet is really helpful. And so that's one of the things I've spent a lot of time doing. And then, there are a lot of people here on Maui that have all kinds of different ways to treat you, and also those little oils, different oils. So that's kind of funny because I probably had 10 people now come to me with a little thing of oil and say, oh my gosh, this is the life-changing oil, or this is the, I'll save your life oil. So I'm not really sure which one is which, but there are those two. Some of those I've liked, especially if I like the smell. And I'm trying to think what else I've done that, some things aren't really that non-medical, but things like chiropractor, that's been really helpful to me lately. But for me, most of it's mental. It's spiritual. It's like, what do you believe? And so for me, as I sit and I meditate every day, and I've had times in my life when I'd meditate for like 2 hours a day. And so if I'm sitting there and I'm meditating, and sometimes I'll just sit there and think, what are you grateful for, Sarah? And it's amazing. I hope everybody tries that. Just sit down for 20 minutes and ask yourself, what am I grateful for? And it can put you in tears sometimes, not sad tears, just happy tears. Like, wow, that I could do that I could help somebody, that I could own this, that I could be a mother, or whatever you're going through in life. It's pretty amazing. It's hard to be unhappy when you start thinking about the things you're grateful for.
That is so true. I don't think I'm afraid of death as much as I'm afraid of dying. What I mean by that, like, do you, this may be too personal of a question, but I guess, have they told you that, I'm banking that you're going to live and everybody here is, but do they tell you how you die when you have cancer? Like, is it a sharp, painful death? Is it like, see, because nobody ever talks about dying.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really important. And I'm not afraid to talk about this stuff at all, whether it's stuff like this with you or just straight up with a doctor. Hey, what do I need to experience? And so sometimes I want to know, and sometimes I don't want to know yet. Like, I don't need to know. So when I was first diagnosed, I didn't need to hear, yeah, you're going to be dead and you're likely to have this, and this happen. What I said was, hey, when is that? When do I need to start knowing that stuff? And he told me. And so, hearing some of this stuff, yeah, it's likely that people with brain cancer, they can be dead in 4 days after getting bad experiences, or 4 months, or sorry, not months, 4 weeks. It generally doesn't go longer than about 4 weeks. And so to me, I sit there and think, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful, because a lot of people are in pain for years, years. And here I'll likely only have 4 weeks of pain. The pain can be headaches, it can be diarrhea, it can be throwing up. Those are common. I can go blind. I've already noticed my eyes are already going, and you guys have already noticed that I lose my brain sometimes as to what I was talking about. So yeah, this stuff is all starting to happen, and it's okay. And I'm grateful. I'll tell you, this is a tough one too, because I never liked this before, but I'm trying to think. The steroids. Never been a fan of steroids. And most of my girlfriends, oh, you don't want to be on steroids, those are terrible. Well, let me tell you, like, if you are going through what I'm going through right now, I'm so grateful for the steroids, because they're really getting rid of a lot of pain that I have otherwise. And it's made my face fatter. I don't have any cheekbones that I used to have. And if I did gain weight in the past, I would gain it in my butt and my thighs, but now I've gained it in my stomach, which is weird for me. I never really gained it in my stomach, but well, that's steroids. But I just think I'm grateful I'm not in pain. I'm grateful I'm not in pain. And one of the things I tell my friends a lot, just as a side note, is that we are not what we look like. Like, we are so taught as women that you've got to look good. You've got to try to look young. You've got to do your makeup and your hair and look thin. And, when I think, if you start looking around the world at people or know of, think of Oprah, for example. Oprah is obese. She's a big, big woman. Oh, sometimes she's not. She loses it, but gains it back. But I don't know one person that said to me, oh, I don't like Oprah. Or God forbid, no one's ever said, I don't like Oprah. She's too big. If she were thin, I would like her. I've never heard that in my life. Like, she's a good, kind person. And that's what people really like about her. But in our brains, we're taught, no, that's not what people like. People like it when you're thin and pretty and everything else. And we need to really start getting that, And that's why I'm okay with my stomach sticking out, my face getting round. It's not my choice. I wouldn't choose that, but I'm okay with it because I think, wow, I'm still alive. Like I'm still alive. I'm still here. I'm on Maui of all places. Like, God forbid, how many people get to be in a place as nice as Maui right now? And so just spending this time where you're constantly being, I don't know, just grateful and aware can really make you such a happy person, even if you're diagnosed like this.
So I always, it's funny because I always try to put myself in other people's positions. Like, what would I do if this happened to me? And of course, I can speculate, but you never really know until it happens to you. But, I'm pretty strict with my diet and I'm still buying into, some of the things you talked about because when you're in the public eye, you get criticized a lot by how you
Mhm.
look and how much you weigh and things like that. But I,
Mhm.
I thought that like if I was given a terminal diagnosis, I would still stay vegan like you. I would not eat an animal to save, even if it meant saving my own life. But I'd probably eat all the crap I could. I mean, because like I'm gonna die anyway. I'd go to well, I don't think Cinnabon's vegan, but all the vegan ice, all the stuff that I don't eat now.
Yeah.
Does that ever cross your mind? Like, oh, what the hell? I'll just eat a bunch of crap.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's been difficult because there's a part of me that wants to be like that because I do try to stop eating so much sugar. I love sugar, so I tend to eat. Especially Maui has such a big vegan community that back home, the local Whole Foods has a couple of like vegan cookies, but here they're like, oh my god, that's good. So here on Maui, I'm like always wanting to eat all these vegan things, and they've got so many of them. But I've also found that if I try to eat this healthier diet and this keto diet part of the time, vegan keto, then I try to do that when I'm on certain kinds of medications and so on and so forth. Um, so I don't completely not allow it, but I know that if the doctor said, "Hey, Sarah, like you're done," and I can feel it, like I can hardly even tell who the doctor is. I can't give you my husband's name anymore. I'd be like, "Okay, bring me the vegan cookies." But I have to be pretty far gone at that point because I do think that eating healthier is probably giving me more time.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Stephanie wants to know that obviously you're under quarantine right now, like most people are in most parts of the world. But when it's lifted, do you have a bucket list?
Oh, that's a great question. And the answer is no. And the reason for that is, what I call my gold ticket incarnation, that I have been spending my life doing things. And I know this is going to sound kind of weird, and some people might be like, "Oh, she's definitely weird." But maybe knowing that I've been in medical research all this time, you might go, maybe not. The weird thing is that when I was about 8, I was just out playing. Nothing had happened recently. No one had died. No dogs had died. Nothing like that. I was just out playing, having a good day, and all of a sudden, I just had this piece of information that came to me that said, "You're going to die young." And I went, okay. And I wasn't upset about it back then. I don't know why I wasn't upset about it back then, but I wasn't. Um, and so going through my life, it's not something I've thought about often. I've often wondered, like after 5 years, like, oh, wow, I'm 25 now. I guess I'm still young, and recently, at 46, 47, I remember thinking, wow, maybe that wasn't true. I really thought that was going to be true, but 48, maybe not. Maybe I'm going to live till 80. And so I didn't know. But the interesting thing is that I just didn't. Trying to think what my point was. I was going to make. I had a point.
If you had a bucket list, if you had a bucket list.
Oh yeah, thank you. That all these things I've been telling you, like for the last 10 years, especially, I've really been looking into life and everything. But having that information when I was young, I don't remember thinking about it often, but I just always lived my life. So if I have this idea of, I should write a book. Oh, you don't know how to write a book. That's all right. I'll just write it and someone else has to know what you do with it. I don't know. Somebody will figure it out. And I would go do it. Oh, I should go on safari. Well, how are you going to get money for that? That's expensive. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We need to go on safari. So I would just see the things I wanted to do and I would go do them. And sometimes it would take a while if I had to raise money, but that's all right. It's how life is.
You're just remarkable, and I don't know what to say. I mean, now I wish I'd known you better the last 17 years. We met at one of Jeff Nelson's Veg Source conferences. I mean, we kept in touch. You're the one that told me about the Stackable Gourmet, which I love to death. And I always got your letter. And, I think if anything to be learned from this is, guys, if you love somebody, tell them now. Don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't wait until you get that email, phone call. Your story reminds me of one of my favorite plays by Thornton Wilder. It's called Our Town. And Emily says, it's the very end of the play, if you're not familiar with it, she goes to the stage manager, who I believe played by Paul Newman in one of the productions. She goes, does anyone ever realize life while they live it? Every minute. And he says, no, saints and poets, maybe they do some. And I would say Sarah Taylor.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, well, I'm here. We are friends, even though we haven't spent a lot of time with each other over 17 years. It's been 17 years, my friends.
If you ever want to come on again, I'm sure you could just really inspire a lot of people like you're doing now. And I'm still gonna put my money on that you're gonna be a survivor, because I'm very selfish, and that's the outcome I want, because I think you still have one more great book in you.
Yeah, we'll see. That would be really cool. I'd be happy about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And everybody, I've been posting the links, and I'll put them in the show notes. Please follow Sarah on Facebook or YouTube, and please share this broadcast with as many people as you can, even if they don't have cancer, because it's really one of the most inspiring ones I've ever done. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, AJ. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.